So whilst we seem to be on the topic of Greek mythology's most commonly asked questions, another one that I see quite often relates to the differences between a titan and a god. So is a titan a god, or are they completely different entities entirely? I've seen people make the argument that titans and gods are not the same. Instead, titans are these giant beings born with powers that symbolize the creation of our world, and as an extension, ourselves. Now some of that statement may in fact be true, but everything we see in Greek mythology points towards titans and gods being classified as very similar, if not the exact same type of entity. My videos on titans are all labelled Titan Goddess or Titan God, and that's because to me the word titan describes what type of god they are and what generation they came from. Greek mythology at its core can be broken down into three separate generations: the primordial deities such as Uranus and Gaia, who are the oldest generation and who physically make up the earth. These deities are often seen as personifications, such as the earth, the sky, and the sea, but at times they are also depicted as being their own physical being. The primordial deities then gave birth to the Titans, who are physical beings but who also represent abstract places and ideas. The Titans then of course had their own children, but these children are somewhat divided. We have the children of Cronus and Rhea, who would be known as the Olympians or the Olympic deities, Zeus and his brothers and sisters. We also have the children that belong to the rest of the Titans, who would be classified as the second generation of Titan. These two combined made up the vast majority of the third generation. So it seems like a fairly simple concept to follow. 3 generations of gods and goddesses with each one representing slightly different things, but they are all still gods and goddesses. So where does this disconnect come from that claims a Titan can be born from a god, give birth to a god, and yet somehow still not be considered a god? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. But the first ever video I made on the God of War franchise did give me a slight insight into why some people may have come to this conclusion. In that specific video, I called Gaia a goddess, and the amount of responses I received from people telling me Gaia isn't a goddess, she's a titan, was definitely quite confusing at the time. Obviously God of War doesn't do a great job when it comes to representing and explaining the titans and the primordial deities, because at times they distinguish between god and titan, rather than titan and Olympian, so it's understandable for there to be some amount of confusion. The Titans are also depicted as being monstrous beings, and I think size may be one of the key reasons that people in general think Titans and gods are not the same. The primordial deities representing the Earth can be seen as colossal in size, and as a result the Titans most likely would have been so as well. But it's important to note that for all of them to fit on the Earth together, the Titans would have to have been significantly smaller. Most of the second generation Titans and the Olympians are never really described as being enormous or colossal in size. But we do know that they were capable of manipulating their own physical form. We see this on numerous occasions in many stories. So it isn't then a huge stretch of the imagination to believe that they were capable of changing their own size whenever it best suited them. There are some things in Greek mythology, however, that we do know. One of those being that the only thing that can create a god or goddess is another god or goddess. Now of course there will always be some exceptions to this rule, and some of you may be thinking, well what about a nymph or a demigod? Well, demigods are only half god. And it is true that nymphs give birth to many of the gods that we know, but nymphs are still considered minor deities. Even if we use the example of Dionysus, the only god to be born from a mortal, it still really isn't the case, because Dionysus was taken out of his dead mother and then sewn into Zeus's thigh, from which he would later be born. We do see gods and goddesses however create and give birth to other entities. Gaia gave birth to the giants, the Hecatoncres and the Cyclopes, but we never really consider them deities. Pegasus came from Medusa and Poseidon. It's not uncommon to see a deity give birth to something that isn't a god or goddess, but the only thing that can give birth to a deity is another deity. We can even simply look at the Titans' children. The Olympians were born around the same time as many of the second generation Titans, so why are they different? Why do we distinguish between Olympian and second generation Titan, despite them being born at the same time, in the same generation, and from the same place? The answer is nothing. Nothing physical at least. The only reason the Olympians have a different title is because they overthrew the ruling class and they marked a new era, the rule of the third generation. So it seems rather strange to classify the Olympians as gods but then say the second generation Titans who were born at the same time from the same place are something different entirely. So to summarize and answer the question, is a Titan a god? Yes, Titans are just simply an older generation of deities, elder gods I guess we can call them. The terms primordial, Titan, and Olympian simply help to identify what generation a deity belongs to. But do I think all 3 generations were the same type of deity? No, I think each generation was unique in its own way, and their children slowly evolved over time, marking the progress and advancement of civilization. Hopefully that clears up any confusion that you may have had, but if you have any more questions or thoughts on the topic then please let me know in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.